What is independent filmmaking? I'm sure a few examples, ideas, or qualifiers pop into your head as this question is raised. A small budget perhaps, a new director, a new auteur made outside of Hollywood, with no influence, art cinema, unknown actors, aesthetic single shots, small cast, crews. Okay, yeah, it's a bit hard to define. Throughout the years, there's been plenty of discourse regarding what exactly defines independent filmmaking. Marcus, in his book on independent cinema, discusses how people usually take two separate avenues for definition: aesthetics and industry. Industrially, many believe independence is brought about through a film being financed outside of big Hollywood studios. As these outside companies finance on a smaller scale, they're acclimated to supporting more niche titles and allowing for more freedom. And thankfully, there are numerous independent film companies, high-profile ones too, like New Line Cinema, Miramax, Dimension, and others. However, as the media landscape shrinks and more companies are bought up, it is increasingly difficult to stray from large Hollywood companies. While these smaller independent-focused companies are largely autonomous, they still answer to their Hollywood parent companies, making this industrial view less credible. As for aesthetics, Marcus surmises that currently, as there is so much content with increasing visual liberty, the lines are converging between both Hollywood and independent as they're both drawing on the same influences and ideas. While both the industrial and aesthetic approaches hold some merit, they're largely outdated and no longer relevant in the film industry today. A modern definition that I believe holds more credibility comes from Bachman Rogers, who defines independent cinema as being in and of crisis. Crisis being a moment of change where specific values decay and new attributes are assimilated. This can be seen through independent filmmakers creating works that both reference and estrange their own history at the same time. Present in classical Hollywood films is an abundance of cliches that utilize an audience's existing film vocabulary. These are used for viewing comfort, facilitating instant understanding and recognition. Independent cinema, on the other hand, shifts and transfigures these classical elements, engaging with and undermining its own heritage, while also playing with audience expectations. This manipulation of classical elements can be seen through many of David Lynch's works, these distorted archetypes being used in service of his ambiguous and mysterious narratives that defy audience expectation. Lynch often uses genre, character, and classical narrative elements in obtuse and distorted ways as a way of furthering audience confusion and pushing his bizarre dreamlike narratives. Lynch is not only a master of challenging expectations of the film medium, but he also goes out of his way to challenge the audience. Sheen and Davison, in their David Lynch book, examine Twin Peaks' Fire Walk With Me, and how Lynch makes the audience confront their own conditions and terms of viewing. Laura Palmer, lovingly mourned by the show and its audience for 2 seasons, is resurrected only to be murdered again on film. The same audience that mourned her, keenly anticipating and craving entering back into the world of Twin Peaks, knowing Laura's grisly fate. Without the audience craving for more Twin Peaks, the film wouldn't exist. In this moment, Lynch poses a reflection point for audiences to look at the content that they excitedly partake in. Lynch poses the question, maybe the audience is just as bad as the show's demented and gleefully violent Bob, partaking in violence and murder for enjoyment. Lynch's work is unique, as it functions in both entertainment and academic contexts. Lynch's films have a lot to unpack regarding their unorthodox style and philosophical musings, and I believe his stance on film discussion greatly elevates them. Lynch, unlike most creatives, insists on having audiences make their own meaning from his obtuse and bizarre mysteries. In this way, Lynch escalates the value of the audience's comprehension of his art, imploring them to unpack it without his interpretations being used as a definitive voice. The endings of his films often leave mysteries and plot elements unresolved, soliciting rumination within the audiences long after the film ends. In an era of increasingly open creator-audience relationships and an extreme emphasis on finality, Lynch stands in direct opposition. And it's not due to a lack of interest either. Lynch is constantly asked and pressured into answers regarding mysteries and theories in which he plainly refuses to answer.
You know, I love mysteries like a book, but I don't like it when it ends and everything is sewn up 100%. That's the thing about the film. It starts and then it ends.
In doing so, I believe Lynch encourages critical rumination and academic discussions of his deeply provocative and rousing films. Through his work, David Lynch makes a strong case for himself as an independent artist, though he also challenges our conceptions of this as he works on various types of production. Lynch is most commonly regarded for his auteuristic, smaller scale works, which leaves Dune as a career black sheep. Though The Elephant Man proved to be a commercial and critical success, his next film, Dune, is a completely different story. Dune sees Lynch's independence being greatly compromised at every level of production: script development, production, and he isn't granted say on the final cut. With a 3-year production cycle, a $45 million budget, and notable star presence, Dune goes against the confines of what we may consider an independent filmmaker's wheelhouse. Outside of this, Lynch's body of work shows him to be an exemplary independent artist. Despite having worked on this film, large future projects, and advertisements for well-known companies, Lynch is an independent filmmaker. Lynch pushes the boundaries though in what we may consider to be an independent filmmaker, as he creates work at various levels of production. In the aftermath of Dune, Lynch disengages with Hollywood and continues on a more traditional independent trajectory, taking a greater hold of all levels of production. In the book, Authorship and the Films of David Lynch, the author Todd makes an interesting observation that Lynch's auteur work functions artistically as well as commercially. Lynch is unique, as his work exists at an intersection between intellectuals and wider audiences, exemplifying himself as not only an artist, but as a product. We can observe this in how Lynch's name is very much a part of the marketing for his films. While it can be seen that notable independent artists are frequently marketed towards both critical and more passive audiences, I find it especially curious in Lynch's case. Lynch actively pushes against classical entertainment norms, yet strangely manages to secure wider audiences. Through this, we can observe independent cinema and specifically Lynch securing their varied and divergent crowds by offering them more stimulating media. In this way, their disregard for wider audiences can be seen as contradictingly enticing that same audience by offering them the unusual, bizarre, and unthinkable. In summary, independent cinema cannot be defined through outdated industrial and aesthetic definitions. Instead, it is best described as cinema in and of crisis, engaging with and dismantling its own history. Lynch, as a pioneering independent artist, challenges not just the medium, but its audience. For example, Fire Walk With Me holds a mirror to the audience in the hopes that they will reflect on their own conditions of reception. Lynch is a good example of how independent cinema goes against classical Hollywood expectations. Lynch offers very minimal dialogue with audiences regarding his films, instead believing that his films speak for themselves and doesn't offer his perspective, thus creating an expectation for audience discourse and speculation. The preconceptions of what make an independent filmmaker are also challenged through Lynch's variety of productions. Finally, Lynch shows how independent cinema exists for both wide audiences and more critical viewers.